well above $100 no matter what you do within a couple of years. And it's not just peak oil, it's peak food production, it's peak topsoil. We're losing topsoil in our country just to make red bricks for houses. At an incredible rate. Phosphorus. Without phosphorus, you can't grow food. And phosphorus sees, at the moment, with the given reserves available, a lifetime of less than beyond this century. Fisheries, according to FAO, 60% of the fisheries of the world have collapsed. Water supplies, uranium, rare earths, you name it. We have basically now, we're facing a different future from the way things were before. The food prices. For literally decades, centuries, the food prices were in a little band, according to the FAO. But by the year 2007, they started going wild. And that's when government started falling. That's when street riots started happening. And this is the future. You see, all through the 20th century, the price of commodities was coming down. Energy was coming down, fertilizers was coming down, even food was coming down. The only things that were going up were basically timber and a little bit of energy. But since 2000, things have changed completely. With the minor glitch that you've just seen in the price of oil, almost everything is now on an upward trend, and it's not going to come down again. We've taken the low-hanging fruits. It's so bad that the rich, even in India, but all over the world, particularly in the US, China, and everywhere else, have realized that they don't have enough land for growing their own food. So what are they doing? They're grabbing land elsewhere. In 2012, more land was bought overseas by overseas investors in Ethiopia, in West Africa, in Latin America, and so on, Cambodia, than the entire agricultural production land of France. Entire crop area of France was exceeded by the amount of land bought in 1 year overseas. See, the Anthropocene is now so endemic, so big, that it is overwhelming the forces of nature. Human beings, 7 billion of us, are outdoing what nature can do. We're moving more materials, other than ocean currents and atmospheric currents. If you leave those out, on the surface, on the crust of the Earth, human beings are moving more material than nature is. Now that is scary if you know what ecology means. So what do you expect? Obviously there are going to be financial breakdowns. Obviously there are going to be major problems even for the rich. So is green growth a contradiction in terms? Is it going to lead to a situation of overshoot and collapse? This is basically something that we've got to think about. And in 1972, the Club of Rome, which I was president of for the last 7 years, brought out a book which was truly an explosion of the mind, a nuclear explosion. It really created a disturbance in intellectual circles. I think the economics profession went into high gear and tried to destroy it, and was probably right until about the year 2000. But basically, what it said was, we cannot go on having infinite growth on a finite planet forever. They drew these very beautiful curves on the basis of the first major global model, and it showed that during the course of this century, towards 2080, 2090, we would be seeing major problems, breakdowns in terms of not only food production, industrial production, pollution, but even population. There would be an uncontrollable decline, if not catastrophic decline of all these. Nobody believed them, but today the writing's on the wall. And there's a lot of intellectual and scientific theory behind material science, between resource management science. One of them is called the ecological rucksacks, the amount of material that is actually moved in order for you to get what you want. For example, you look at this gold ring. Its weight, you might think, is, say, 20 grams, but in fact, it has a rucksack of 20 tons. To get one little gold ring on your finger, you have to move 20 tons of material. Now that basically has to be factored into our modeling. So there's another way we do this, and all of you know this. This is called the ecological footprint, which is basically looking at how much land is needed to provide our biophysical resources for each one of us. So the ecological footprint has gone up worldwide, and it so happens India is on the average of the world. America is 5 times as much, Dubai is 20 times as much, but India is more or less on the average. So if you see this, you see both the global and the Indian one. At the time of independence, we were at about 0.4, 0.35, 0.4. We were using 1/3 of the land area for sustaining us. Now, in the year 2015, we're at about 1.7, and we are continuing to grow pretty rapidly. A 0.1 roughly every 2 years. We keep on going. What we have to do now is figure out ways in which to start coming down. And it's not just a footprint, it's a bootprint. Because when you have this situation, only the powerful get the benefits. So basically, it's the people around the world or inside our country. It's only the rich and powerful, and all the others have to basically scatter and fend for themselves in whatever way they can. Another aspect of this science is about stability, about what you might call a stable outcome. Growth led to all kinds of other ideas like carrying capacity, guardrails, tipping elements, and today we talk about planetary boundaries. But the point is that all ecosystems have various points of stability. And you look at this one, for example. When you have corals or clear water or grasslands, it's unstable in this point. But as you overfish or you start eutrophication or prevent fire and so on, these barriers start coming down. And then you end up gradually in a new stability, which is not so good, and you can't get back. So many of these things are irreversible, and your modeling has to take account of that. Today, we talk about boundaries, planetary boundaries and safe operating spaces, and at least 4 of these have been transgressed already. The integrity of the biosphere, biogeochemical flows, particularly the flows of phosphorus and nitrogen, and maybe, well, of course, carbon because of the atmospheric thing, and land system changes. These are all major changes that are happening in which we have to worry, not only at the planetary level, but also at the global level. This is an interesting diagram because it makes you think. Human well-being, we have that 2080 or 99-1 dilemma. We have the climate change. How do we get to stabilize the carbon emissions so that the climate won't go beyond 2 degrees? We have the ecosystem problem of huge extinctions of species and biodiversity loss. But the funny thing is, all of these things have happened in the last 30 years. 30 years ago, nobody even knew about these things. Today, they're headline material. The only summits that the world has with heads of state coming are on these subjects. They are big. But what is to say that in the next 30 years, these will be the only ones? What worries me for the future of my country is the surprise dilemma. What is coming down the pike that we don't even know about? And these are all the natural ones, physical ones. Don't forget there are also social ones. The breakdown of societies, the alienation, the terrorism, all of those also are related in some ways to these. So we've got to figure out a way in which to decouple our well-being. We must get better and better lives, of course, from material and other resource use. It's called decoupling. You can have relative decoupling because poor countries like India can't reduce the amount of resources. They're not using enough. Or you can have absolute decoupling. So this is what we call for the developing countries, the South, the important thing, to grow faster than the amount of resources you use. But in the case of the rich ones, they actually have to reduce. They have to do more with less. So it's a very different approach. And this politically is a diagram that we really have to sell at the UN, that we're talking about different things. You can't have the same lesson. You have the same fundamental lesson. Everybody's got to reduce resource use, but you have to be more efficient over there, and you have to be doubly efficient over here. I plotted here the Human Development Index over here, better lives towards the right, and the ecological footprint, better ecology towards down. So this is the square, this is the rectangle in which we ought to be, where you have high quality of life, but low impact on Mother Earth. Well, you can see that only one little country has been able to squeeze into there, only just, and that's Cuba. But basically, none of us, we are all here. This is India. None of us is anywhere near that. That's America, this is India, this is China, but we have a long way to go. But that's the quadrant in which we have to end up. So why is India in trouble? I've now described what the planetary issues are. India is in trouble because there's another 800 million people living in the same space at the same time, but in another country called Bharat. So we're all intermingling, but we're hardly, we only see each other in domestic servants and factory workers and agricultural labor, but basically we're living different countries. And that is also a terminal disease, which we call povertitis. This one is really bad. It has virtually no way out. There's no cure to this unless very drastic medicine. These are people who live like this. This is a woman in Bundelkhand where I work. 20 years ago, I took this picture. I hope that her life is a lot better now. But in it, you can see everything she owns. All her possessions are in that picture. In fact, you might say that her whole world is in that picture. You can imagine how many Marie Curies and Indira Gandhis and people are dying before they have a chance to show themselves as what they could do for our country. These are all kids. One of them could be a genius. One of them could be a great artist. None of us will ever know. And all she can do is produce babies and try and look after them. 300 million people in India have no clean drinking water. And that is counted as not having clean drinking water is that there is no source of water within 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile. If you feel thirsty at night, you have to take a glass of water, walk a mile through snake-infested fields, come back, and you count it as having drinking water. It's only if you have to walk more than 1 mile. And that's 300 million. And there's a daily battle in urban and peri-urban areas for water like that. You have to do this. According to the government of India, 500,000 people die prematurely, women, children, die prematurely just because of what is euphemistically called indoor air pollution, which is basically the kitchen. We can put people into orbit. We can do all kinds of things on the ground. We can make the greatest scientific innovations, but we can't make a damn chula. You know, our scientists, the best in the world, still haven't been able to produce something that will help this woman cook properly. Collecting fuel wood, 700 million of them have no toilets, 800 million of them don't have any modern energy. This is the Indian version, the Prajapatis of Bundelkhand. I got the family together, brought out their food for a week. And that's what it looks like. This is in rupees. They're caught in a trap of poverty, resource degradation, more children, no markets they can never get out of unless we do something. And it's so easy to do, as I will try and show you in a minute. We talk about FDI and we talk about bringing in more industries, but look at the growth of the informal sector. 2006, there were 60 million. Now, today, there are about 85 million. Every year, we've been increasing the number of people in the so-called informal sector. Sure, they have jobs, but they don't have the jobs that you or I would consider acceptable. They don't have any security. They don't have any real dignity in their jobs or meaning. And then there is the gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla in this room, which is, of course, population. We have a lot of people, and we're continuing to have even more. The south of India, of course, has made the demographic transition, but in the north, we really have a problem that has to be solved. we are still growing at a very rapid rate. And this poor girl, by the way, there are 3 people in this picture. You might not see the little sister that she's holding in her cradle. This little girl and her sister and her brother are asking very simply, what is this country doing for me? You and I don't have to ask that question, but they do. And we have to find ways to deal with that. So I showed you the number of millionaires that have been growing, up to 160,000. But look at the number of hungry and malnourished people that are growing, and that's in millions. This graph is in thousands, and this is in millions. And it's very funny, but it's almost parallel. It leads, if I were an academic, I would say, is there a cause and effect relationship here? I mean, isn't it very strange that the thing is so well correlated? So now, if you have both these diseases, as we do in our country, or we're beginning to have in our country, you have a virtually standstill society. Now, I'm going to use the rest of my few minutes on solutions. I believe that if you've got to create the number of jobs that we've got to create, something of the order of 1 billion around the world, 250, 300 million in our country, we have to do very different things. You have to have jobs of all kinds. You have to have village jobs, you have to have city jobs, you have to have household jobs, forest jobs, and we're going to have to create decent, sustainable livelihoods on a large scale, the number 1 priority in India. And we've got to do that producing stuff that people need, basic needs, shelter, food, clothing, energy, etc. I'm sorry, this keeps jumping a bit. And in order to get those solutions, I'd like to just share with you what would be the way to do the innovation, how do you get the multiplication, how do you scale up. Well, a sustainable future for India has to be one that has a just, socially just, fair society, and it has a green economy. That's pretty simple. It's only 2 things we need to do. A just and long-term society needs to meld the imperatives of economics with the imperatives of the environment and with the desirabilities of the social issues. In other words, fairness, environmental harmony, and growth. So clearly, these 3 things have to come together, and you've got to get them together. But we can't do it the wrong way around. We've been putting economics first as the big thing, and all the other stuff. It's got to be the economy is within the society, is within the life support systems. It's inverting the way we've been thinking. In other words, if you turn our policy making on these issues upside down, you may be much closer to where we have to go. There are engineers in this room and managers, and so you would understand that we need to increase our productivity, and productivity what? Of everything, of capital, land, nature, etc., and particularly of our knowledge systems. Now, this is a 1-slide lesson, Cybernetics 101, on efficiency. Efficiency is not simply about rated efficiency. It's not simply about what's output over input. It's also potential efficiency, what should be. If you make a minor adjustment, what you should have with more or less the resources you have and the technology you have. And a higher level would be a latent efficiency, what could be if you make some fundamental changes. Some changes in structure, bring in new technology or whatever. And then there is systemic efficiency, when you actually change the system. Once I changed the bus system of Delhi in 1973 when the price of oil went up, and what I did basically was make the routes and the timings and the schedule